Hello and welcome to chapter 18 of our discussion and analysis of Wuthering Heights. We're now over halfway, so we're in the second half of the novel. So we're going to be catching up to the present of the story where Lockwood came in at the start. We're going to catch up to that point. So let's have a look. And also, before I say that, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, notification bell, all of those things. I appreciate you joining me on this journey, and I've got lots of other videos you might be interested in as well. So let's have a look. So chapter 18, not too much to say on this page, I thought, really, but I noticed that, oops, sorry, moving it instead of using the pointer. There we go. So we have more natural imagery. I thought it was quite nice to have this simile here. Larch, the type of tree, of course. So young Cathy, the child, you know, she's growing up. It's been 12 years. She's growing up and likened to a tree, which connects to, well, many other instances of descriptions of nature being likened to people. The one that popped into my head was right at the start of the novel, with Lockwood observing the trees around Wuthering Heights, and we think about that as analogous to Heathcliff, his upbringing, and actually other characters as well when you think about it, but particularly Heathcliff. And we have more here. Before the heath blossomed a second time over Mrs. Linton's dust, and so time is being measured as well in terms of nature there. And also we have, she's the most winning thing that ever brought sunshine into a desolate house, so a metaphor there as well. So lots of natural imagery to give a sense of this is the second half of the novel. There is a new beginning here. It links to the start of the first half of the novel in some ways, but we've got the next generation here, and this is right now embodied in young Catherine, or Cathy as Edgar Linton would refer her to. On the last page, actually, before I jump back, she's got some combination factors of the Earnshaws and the Lintons there. So let's go to the next page. So she is a bit like a kind of Mark II version of Catherine, but she's got a better. She's like a merged version. She's bringing out these different qualities. She could be soft and mild as a dove, and she had a gentle voice and pensive expression. Her anger was never furious. So she is like her mother, but she doesn't really have the worst elements of her mother, like the kind of the mood swings and the capriciousness and all of those things that we've, I could say, we know and love about the older Catherine. If they maybe loves, maybe a bit strong, but anyway. So 12 years, and then she's kind of forthright. She is stands up for herself. She's a confident young woman. So she's got that kind of assertiveness of the Earnshaws as well, but she's a good person. So she also has this real connection with nature, and Edgar Linton, as her father, wants to restrict and protect her from being exposed to the world of Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff. So because she reached the age of 13, she had not once been beyond the range of the park by herself. Mr. Linton would take her with him a mile or so outside on rare occasions, but he trusted her to no one else. So living a very sheltered life. And if you think of a theme of the novel is this idea of your upbringing shaping your personality. Of course, if you deny children anything, it makes them want it more. Catherine, young Cathy here, I should say, Cathy has an affinity with nature that is being denied because Edgar Linton is being overprotective. So it's just going to make him more and more curious anyway. We're going to see all this. You can probably guess where all of this is going anyway. So we have Mr. Linton would take her with him also outside on rare occasions, but he trusted her to no one else. Gimmerton was an unsubstantial name in her ears, the chapel, the only building she had approached or entered except her own home. So we've said before about the novel is very much like a bubble universe, and for young Catherine, Cathy Mark II here, it's even more of a bubble universe. It's like she's living in a snow globe effectively. She's given a really, really restrained experience of the world by her father, who admittedly is trying to protect her, but it's just going to drive her natural curiosity as well. Wuthering Heights of Mr. Heathcliff did not exist for her. She was a perfect recluse and apparently perfectly contented. Sometimes indeed, while surveying the country from a nursery window, she would observe Ellen, how long will it be before I can walk to the top of those hills? I wonder what lies on the other side. Is it the sea? Notice here, there's that natural curiosity that Bronte gives the character. And they're trying to protect her from it. The abrupt descent of Penistone Crags particularly attracted her notice, especially when the setting sun shone on it and the topmost heights and the whole extent of landscape besides lay in shadow. I explained that they were bare masses of stone with hardly enough earth in their clefts to nourish a stunted tree. So you see, again, interrogatives, sentences, you've got this curiosity, this natural curiosity, and it's, as you'd expect, it's not just natural curiosity, it's natural curiosity about nature as well. And she asks all of these questions. Children are often very inquisitive, but Cathy is very fussy as well. There's symbolism in this as well, but we will get to that. Now, look at that on the surrounding topography. So when she finds out Nelly's been on there, oh, you've been on them, Penistone Crags. I think we may have mentioned it before, actually, haven't we? Then I can go too when I am a woman. Has Papa been, Ellen? Actually, can I go too when I am a woman? Now, there's some good symbolism going on here, because if you think about it now, when I am a woman, Bronte's got some symbolism going on here about transition to womanhood. So you've got Cathy, 12, 13, you've got this kind of age. She wants to go out in the world. Symbolically, Bronte has got her looking at Penistone Crags. I think the naming, I don't think is coincidental. I think there's definitely, again, YouTube, I've got to be careful what I say, but it's pretty obvious, Penistone Crags. And just to really hammer home this symbolism about the idea of a transition to womanhood, one of the maids mentioning the fairy cave quite turned her head with a desire to fulfil this project. So the idea of going up to the fairy cave at Penistone Crags. Again, YouTube, I can't say it out clearly. Hopefully you're working it out for yourself why this might represent ideas about Cathy's transition from childhood to womanhood. Teenagers didn't really exist as a word in that era. They didn't really think in those kind of terms. So here's the idea of Cathy. Yeah, again, fairy cave, Penistone Crags. You got it. You should have it by now. Okay, very good. I will move on. And it's also one of the maids interested as well. Another young woman there, young servant interested. Yeah, you see, it can't be a coincidence, can it, when you start thinking about it? Then we have, I said Mrs. Heathcliff lived above a dozen years after quitting her husband. Whatever illness was, I'm not certain. I conjecture they died of the same thing, a kind of fever, slow at its commencements but incurable and rapidly consuming life towards the close. The Linton family have got some kind of health defect, haven't they? And it seems to be in all of them. So we're gonna, Isabella's had it. Young Linton, we'll see soon. He's got it. Edgar Linton. They've all got this particular trait of prone to weakness. It's almost as if they're too refined in some ways. I think Bronte's got symbolism here in terms of the ideas of they're too far removed from nature, so they're almost like too cultivated and too refined. So they're like house plants, really, who can survive in a comfortable environment, but out in the wild that die within a couple of days. I think that's what the Lintons are a bit like. And if you remember about the older Catherine, the original Catherine's idea about her love for Linton being like the foliage in the woods, there's this sense of fragility. And I think this idea of a kind of cultivated nature for the Lintons, for that Linton line. Young Cathy doesn't seem to have that because she's got a combination of the best qualities of the Lintons and the Earnshaws. So she seems to have overcome that defect. Then we have young Catherine here with reiterated orders that she must not wander out of the park even under my escort. He did not calculate on her going unaccompanied. And actually that idea of Edgar Linton's protectiveness about her, it links to protectiveness ideas about not wanting to be exposed to Heathcliff, not being exposed to sexuality, not wanting to grow up, idea about her protecting her as well. And again, reiterating that thing we just discussed now about the kind of cultivated requirement and protection that's needed for the Lintons, like a fragile pot plant. He wants her to kind of stay within the realm of Thrushcross Grange and Thrushcross Park, where she won't be exposed to the dangers of the world, won't be subject to the weaknesses of the Linton line. But as I say, she's actually tougher anyway, really. Then I used to send her on her travels around the grounds, now on foot and now on a pony, indulging her with a patient audience of all her real and imaginary adventures when she returned. I think contextually there's elements here about the Bronte sisters and even their brother as well used to, as children, write fantasy stories. They had a whole fantasy kingdom that they imagined, and some of Bronte's later poems are set in that imaginary kingdom as well. It's worth looking at if you're interested, and you can see some echoes of Wuthering Heights. You can see a lot of this stuff here, and the idea of self-contained pocket universes, there's a real sense of that with Wuthering Heights. But I think there's a bit of that protected upbringing that the Bronte sisters would have had themselves. They didn't have obviously as lavish a lifestyle as they would have had as if they were the Linton children, but I think the idea of Cathy living out imaginary games, imagination, very important to the Bronte sisters. Then we have some more nature references there as well. There was a labourer working at a fence around a plantation on the borders of the grounds. I inquired of him if he had seen our young lady. So Catherine, surprise, surprise, because of her inquisitive nature, Cathy, young Catherine, she wanders off. Surprise, surprise. So the gardener, the labourer, I saw her at morning, replied, she would have had me cut her hazel switch, and then she leapt her galloway over the hedge yonder when it's lowest and galloped out of sight. So that would have been like a riding crop, effectively, to hit the horse. So she was obviously planning to escape, on the pony and explore. So you may have guessed how I felt hearing this news. It struck me directly she must have started for Penistone Crags. You see, look, Anyway, right, okay, YouTube, right. That's not linked to it. Oh dear. Okay, I better move on. Sorry. Therefore, that meant to say something suddenly. Okay, that's important. Right. Okay, right. Let's move on. Then I entered and beheld my stray lamb seated on the hearth. Oh yeah. So what happens is Catherine does escape. She ends up. Guess where she ends up? Wuthering Heights itself. Rocking herself in a little chair that had been her mother's when a child, so Bronte emphasising that connection between the generations. You've got this little blonde version of the older Catherine, and she's naturally gravitated towards Wuthering Heights and naturally gravitated to the chair, presumably because of this great connection with a mother and also this connection with nature as well. I think obviously the romantic idea, it's not just nature as in natural things, as in the landscape and mountains and rivers and streams and fields and moors and all these things, but it's also human nature connected to that as well. So this is almost like her human nature has drawn her there, because she's got the similar human nature to her mother, but she's much less annoying. Then her hat was hung against the wall and she seemed perfectly at home. Then Hareton, now a great strong lad of 18, so he was obviously the son of Hindley and Francis as well. We have, I think there's an idea in the novel as well. I was thinking about this the other day. There seems to be a thing where if the children have been created in a stable, either stable moment or a more healthy relationship, then the children grow up okay. It seems to be a bit of a running theme there if you think about it, because even like Hareton, who Heathcliff tries to shape into a little mini version of himself, as horrible as Hindley was, I mean, the only good thing about him really was he was dedicated to his wife, and he was really in love with his wife. They were in love with each other. So Hareton was born of love. Catherine and Edgar, before Heathcliff turns up, their child is created through love as well. But look at Linton. When we see Linton and his defective constitution, his fragility. Of course, he was born from a relationship that wasn't loving. It was Isabella and Heathcliff. So it's a little bit of an idea I was just throwing around in my head this week. But if you look at it, then yeah, seems plausible, doesn't it? So she encounters her cousin Hareton for the first time. Then she commenced capering around the room and on my giving chase ran like a mouse. So again, links to animals here as well. Similarly there, over and under behind the furniture, rendering it ridiculous for me to pursue. Hareton and the woman laughed. She joined them and waxed more impertinent still, till I cried in great irritation. So a similar to Catherine there, the older Catherine. Who is his master? Continued the tiresome girl, appealing to me. He talked about our house and our folk. I thought you had been the owner's son. And he never said. He should have done, shouldn't he, if he's a servant? So really, like the start of the novel, when Lockwood goes to Wuthering Heights, we've got a very similar story here of young Catherine's first appearance at Wuthering Heights. And she encounters many of the same characters. Even the servant, Zillah, it seems to be the same servant. But young Catherine meets Hareton. Obviously, it's one of the people that Lockwood met when he was there. But because of young Cathy's nature, she's got more of a natural affinity to the Heights than Lockwood does. So Bronte, you can see she's creating a parallel situation here. She's framing it this way. But like the start of the novel, there's this confusion about the social status of Hareton as well. And Lockwood has that whole confusion about what the domestic setup is. He doesn't understand, is this young lady, obviously young Catherine when she's grown up, is she Mrs. Heathcliff? Is Hareton a servant? What's going on here? This is all really weird. So there's a similar thing happening here. But of course, this time the reader is more aware of what's going on. We don't have that same confusion as Lockwood, so it's working a different thing. So at this point, we're now much better informed, aren't we? Like Lockwood is himself being told the story by Nelly. Mr. Hareton there, be not the master's son. He's your cousin, and I was never hired to serve you. So the idea, again, of this very strange setup, and there's a theme of withholding of information as well, restricting people, imprisonment, entrapment. So even Edgar Linton, in a way, with young Catherine later on, we see young Catherine is imprisoned by Heathcliff, effectively, like restricted at the Heights. Lockwood has been as well. But even Edgar Linton has confined young Catherine. And I appreciate I garbled that point, but I think I said so much. I think if I went back and tried to edit it, I might have a bit of a problem. So I'm going to leave it. Hopefully that all makes sense. Then we'll go to the next page. So she can't believe it, young Catherine. He's not my cousin Ellen, she went on, gathering fresh grief from the reflection and flinging herself into my arms for refuge from the idea. So again, that confusion. I could scarcely refrain from smiling at this antipathy to the poor fellow, who was a well-made, athletic youth, good-looking in features and stout and healthy, but attired in garments befitting his daily occupations of working on the farm and lounging among the moors after rabbits and game. So Hareton is established as a character. Again, he's unusual. He is actually a cousin. Heathcliff is also kind of suppressed the nature of Hareton as well. So Bronte sets up, there's a parallel between young Cathy here and Hareton. Hareton's not been restrained in nature so much, but he's been restrained from his true nature as heir to Wuthering Heights. So you can see there's a deliberate connection in these second generation characters here. And I thought I could detect in his physiognomy a mind owning better qualities than his father ever possessed. So in the 19th century cultural context, they believed in this. It's a complete pseudoscience. There's no truth in it at all. But they thought you could work out a person's personality through their facial features. And this was also used in many ways, like to try and evaluate criminals. And it was used in a racist way in terms of colonialism as well. It was just this widely held belief, and it was just part of wider popular culture that everyone assumed it was a thing. Physiognomy, about these facial features saying something about your personality. But it's a load of guff, to put it mildly. There's absolutely nothing in it at all. but they thought it was at the time. So essentially that Hareton is he's better than Hindley is what Bronte's really getting at here. So there is hope for this second generation, yet notwithstanding evidence of a wealthy soil that might yield luxuriant crops under other unfavourable circumstances. So Mr. Heathcliff, I believe, had not treated him physically ill, thanks to his fearless nature, which offered no temptation to that course of oppression. He had none of the timid susceptibility that would have given zest to ill treatment in Heathcliff's judgment. He appeared to have bent his malevolence on making him a brute. He was never taught to read or write, never rebuked for any bad habit which did not annoy his keeper, never led a single step towards virtue or guarded by a single precept against vice. So, in a similar way to Cathy's restrictions at Thrushcross Grange, not being able to go into nature, Hareton's had the opposite. He's been allowed to go into nature and work around nature, but he's not been allowed to be the true person he could be. He's not been educated, for example, and he's kind of been encouraged to be sweary effectively as well. Then Joseph contributed much to his deterioration by a narrow-minded partiality which prompted him to flatter and pet him as a boy because he was the head of the old family. So because Joseph would respect him as the last remains of the Earnshaws, and obviously Joseph has devoted his life to his Earnshaws, Hareton really do no wrong. So he's come up, he's been raised kind of to be quite brutish, as it says here, effectively. So at present he laid the whole burden of Hareton's faults on the shoulders of the usurper of his property. So Joseph blames Heathcliff for Hareton's deficiencies. Then Catherine told Hareton who she was and where she was going and asked him to show her the way. So actually, what happens here, the structure is a bit weird because then it jumps back to how Catherine got there, if you see what I mean. It leaps back. That confused me originally when I was going through it. I remember the first time, and even this time looking at it. So Nelly then recounts how she got to this point. So it's when they met and when they got there. Look at this though. He opened the mysteries of the fairy cave and 20 other queer places. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that they did anything, but symbolically representing a kind of sexual awakening for young Cathy. She's met this attractive young man out in nature as well. And so, yeah, it represents a kind of sexual awakening there as well. So that's all good. But yeah, the structure is a bit weird in this bit, but it goes back into... But I insisted most on the fact if she revealed my negligence of his orders, he would perhaps be so angry that I should have to leave, and Cathy couldn't bear that prospect. She pledged her word and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl. So Nelly makes Catherine promise to not reveal to Edgar, her father, but that she's been up at Wuthering Heights, because Nelly would get in a lot of trouble and she'd probably get sacked, and Cathy doesn't want that to happen because she likes Nelly. So there we go. We will leave that one there. That was chapter 18. Hope you enjoyed that. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell. Have a look at the other videos. And I will see you on the next one. Thank you for listening and have a good day or night, whatever you are doing. Goodbye.